Hello, and welcome to OnPoint, a podcast by Oak Street Funding where we sit down with industry leaders bringing insights to the topics you want to hear about. I'm your host, Zak Crickmore, Senior Underwriting Manager at Oak Street Funding. Let's get on point. Today I'm joined by Matt Lescault, founder at TydeCo, and we're going to discuss utilizing technology for talent management. We'll touch on challenges when implementing tech, automation, ethical considerations, and more. Matt, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Zach, it's great to be here.
To start, in what ways can technology help bridge the gap when facing talent shortages in certain industries?
Well, I think if we can start with the fact that in the industry that we're in the accounting industry, it's very much a people-driven service industry. So even though tech is very, very important, at the end of the day, we always just have to operate and approach every day with understanding that we as people are serving our clients that are people, right? And we look at tech as a guide, as a additive to that, but we can't take away from the personal side of what we're doing for our clients and what we're doing internally together as a team. But to answer your question more specifically, I would say that technology is a way to allow us to elevate the services, allow us to elevate how we approach communication, and elevate how the industry in general can service the wider needs of the client base.
How do you think technology assists with automating tasks to free up time for CPAs to focus on their clients and other responsibilities with your company?
It's an interesting question. The reason I say that is there's different technologies for different tasks, right? So in a CPA world, you have your tax preparation software. Sometimes that includes your time management component. Sometimes that includes your work project management or workflow solution. The question here is how do we find the right tech stack to support each individual organization? And so it's such a broad conversation. It's such a broad decision making. So if you're an outsourced accounting company, like what Lesko and Waterman was when we first came to Oak Street, we had a very specific set of tools that helped us do outsourced accounting solutions, to do bookkeeping, to do controller, to do CFO level services. That isn't the same type of software that a traditional CPA firm might do for their audit practice or their tax practice. But the question here, in my mind, flows more into what tech helps really elevate the unique processes within each company. So when we've done it and we look at things like Asana for project management, that's what we chose. It's more of a flexible tool that can really do anything under the sun from a project management perspective, but allows us to deploy it between operations and client delivery. We have software like HubSpot for a CRM, but it's far more than a CRM. It is marketing automation to sales automation, CRM data, integration between our other products. Each firm and each organization, whether they're an accounting firm or not, needs to understand what they're trying to achieve by investing in a set of technology programs. And we think of that as the technology stack within an organization. And so it's not about the right technology stack. It's about the right technology stack for that organization, for that firm. And so it's more about getting a little bit deeper into what the needs are. I've seen a lot of different organizations, firms that operate really differently from a technology perspective. And if I take a step here is one of the things that we do as a firm in our partnership with Sage is something called Sage Intact Accountants, in which we support other accounting firms in deploying advisory departments or services across their client base. And we see firsthand how technology differs between each firm that we work with.
Excellent. How do you feel the adoption of new technologies lead to increased professional growth and expanded roles for your existing staff?
So, to be completely frank, the challenge with adopting technology is change management. So everybody has this vision of like what technology can do for their firm. It can increase profits, it can increase efficiency and effectiveness, it can do all these metrics. But how do you actually bring technology into an organization and manage the change, that change management aspect? And so I'm not exactly answering your question, but I think it's more important to understand that when you make these decisions, that you're finding a way to really incorporate a process, a pathway for your staff to really buy in and incorporate their own thought process into the adoption of this technology. So a lot of times when we look at implementing technology or we look at managing this change, is we look for small wins first. How do we find the smallest win to show somebody, show a group of people how this change is going to help them and make their life easier, and then start rolling out some of the more complex change. If you do it that way, then you get buy-in. The adverse component of this, when we deal with it, is when we have this issue where we go straight to complexity to try to solve a big problem, and now we've created so much friction around that change process that we get a ton of pushback by the overall members that are trying to adopt it, whether it's staff, external, internal, or so forth. And that's really the art of managing change from a technology perspective. Now, I'll be the first one, and the questions are really centered around the idea of like how does technology support the growth of firms? That's kind of what I'm hearing across these conversations, and it absolutely supports the growth of firms. But I'll tell you, I've seen one firm try to adopt the same exact software as another firm, but do it differently, and one is wholly more successful than the other. So it's not just about the technology, it's about the approach, and it's about the communication of that approach, the why. For me, why matters, and I try to communicate why. But I'll tell you what, even in my own organization, when I think I'm providing the why, I very, very frequently find out that the other people still don't understand the why. And I need to spend more time focusing on and uh, not re-explaining, but really managing that knowledge and continue to reinforce that knowledge throughout the process.
I think you made two very good points there with the starting small with your changes. I think I'm completely on board with that. You know, you don't want it to take off a big chunk and try to make it work when you can start working small and almost take stair steps up to a big transition. You know, so I completely agree with that approach, and also with the why. I'm a big proponent of if I'm going to train somebody or teach somebody something, I want them to know the why we're doing it a certain way, so when I'm not around, they're just not like, "Well, he did it this way," but they don't really know the why to it, so getting the why behind the transitions and or the technology that's making them better, if they understand how it's doing that, it's definitely gonna make them a more productive and better employee.
And buy
Um,
into that
I
process.
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's
You're
interesting.
trying to offload all your knowledge into them so then they understand why how are you thinking you're going to find a solution, and then they actually start thinking about the solution with you.
Exactly. I actually have a interesting example of this that just happened recently. So I'm on the phone with my sales team and I'm talking to them about the importance of data integrity within the CRM. And I think that most of the time the mentality goes into this is just admin work. They're just asking me to do admin work, and this does, all that matters is when I close. And when I sat
Mhm.
down and I said to them, I said, like, the reason this information is so impactful to the organization is that if we understand the time to close, if we understand where we're hitting barriers, if we understand what marketing activities are actually producing, but more importantly, which ones are not producing, we can make impacts as leadership into your experience through this data, and we can help you close more, make more money yourself, and be more successful. So it's not admin work. It is building data intelligence back into the organization. And it takes that reinforcement of those messages to be successful throughout business in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. How do you think technology is reshaping the traditional approaches to recruitment and talent management in your organization?
So we're super technology forward. If anybody wants to wants to meet and talk to me, I'm happy to do it. But it's like we invest an incredible amount of time, effort, money into the technology. So we have a completely separate system that is our recruitment management system, our ATS, applicant tracking system, and we have an entire process and program around how we do that. We have a dedicated full time employee that just does recruitment every day to bring through the process. And then from there, once we get somebody onboarded into the ATS, not onboarded from an employee perspective, but onboarded into ATS, there's a whole path from initial questionnaire knockout to initial interview with the recruiting side to peer interviews to supervisor interviews that we do to really try to hone in on what's the right hire. When I look at it, hiring for organizations is where you win or lose. That's your money moment as a company, especially in professional services. If you fail in selecting the right people, it's going to be very impactful because you don't know that you fail for at least 6 months, quite frankly. And it's not just about failing like it was a bad selection of the person, because maybe the person was the right person or had the right pedigree, but they didn't fit culturally. So all of this is to go back into and say, like, from our side of the house, technology starts with being able to, in the applicant tracking system, look at a resume, understand what that resume is telling us, give us feedback about the resumes. Because when we do some of the posts, we sometimes get thousands of resumes and we have to sift through this and we have to rely on that software to weed in and out. But it's our job also to train what that looks like. So like I get this completely sidebar, but I find it comical with all these people on LinkedIn that talk about how to use AI to make the best resume. Well, what you're doing is you're actually completely whitewashing yourself and making yourself look like everybody else. And that is a big problem. And that's where we have to balance how technology supports us in this process. Anyway, that was a little of a tangent, but
No, yeah. No, it's a very good point, though. I mean, a lot of people, relying on technology 100% is not going to get you there. You still have the human aspect to what you need done in your company, and a computer's, it might pick the right person at times, but getting to know that person and implementing them into, like you said, your other, your workforce, sometimes people just don't jive with each other, and it's just, certain positions, although their, qualifications are probably above and beyond what you were looking for. You get somebody in there and you're just like, man, it just doesn't feel like it's working. And you just can't tell that until you get face to face with them or get them in like a working environment with your other employees.
I mean, and that's where a really strong interview process makes sense. Like when my director of people and culture put in the new recruitment process in which we had like multiple interview processes, I was like, man, this is really time consuming. I didn't have to deal with it because I was always like, if it was somebody that was reporting to me, I was always the last. And so mine was the easiest. But what I started to realize is you can only fake it for so long as an applicant. So if you made it through all these steps and you're consistent around what you communicated and you continued to have good questions and you continued to be engaged in the process, it said a lot about you as an individual, not just as what your skill set is. I always say you take the smartest person, you can train them to do almost anything. I'd rather have somebody that really fits my culture, that really has an aptitude for what it is, and build them up than to find somebody that doesn't fit my culture with all the knowledge in the world, personally.
It's probably why we're a good fit with each other. I feel like that's very similar to how Oak Street is. I mean, we're a very niche, organization. You can go out and find talent, underwriting, sales, whatever it is, you bring them in here. It feels like they're in a completely different world. Well, when I used to do mortgages, it was like this. They get here and it just feels completely foreign to them. So I can really relate on that.
I know this is not what we're talking about, but one of the things I've always respected about Oak Street is I can talk to people about the reality of business.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
And I mean that in a very in a very positive way, and going like, okay, here's what we're dealing with, here's the challenges, here's what I'm trying to deal with. And from Oak Street side, you guys have an understanding of the business. And so I'm not just dealing with a bunch of people behind a computer screen on a phone that are just running numbers. I'm dealing with people that understand the overall structure. So I give hats off for that.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. What ethical considerations should companies keep in mind when utilizing tech?
So I'm gonna take a step back here, and one of the things that we do as an organization is we do implementations for Sage, specifically Sage Intacct, which is an ERP software, an accounting software. It's for upper small business and mid market organizations or client or companies. And our job is to be the implementation or professional services arm for the direct sales team at Sage. Man. Currently, I like to say, it's not that I like to say, but the reality is we are the number one partner when it comes to the number of units that we implement on an annual basis on behalf of Sage. And it means that we have to be really good at how we approach technology implementations, software implementations, and be able to manage this because we're doing a lot of them. And it's not just for direct sales. Let's be very clear. We are partners in the US, Canada, Africa, Middle East. We do implementations in all three countries. We're the number one partner in Africa, Middle East. We are the number one, tied for the number one partner for the systems implementer here in the US. In Canada and South Africa, we are driving what's called Sage Intacct Accountants, which is a new program globally. And so we do a lot of implementation. So our job is to manage change in software, that change management application for organizations. What I can tell you is the biggest challenges that firms face, not accounting firms, but companies in general, is not having a good project plan. Now, as an implementer, that's one of our number one remits in our job is like we come with the project plan, we come with the project manager, we come to help guide organizations through that change application. The unfortunate part is that a lot of implementation failures come from poor project management, poor change management. And I always talk about this every time I do a scoping call. So what a scoping call is where I'm asking a bunch of questions around an organization's needs, what are pain points, what are their current processes, and I'm building up a statement of work that outlines exactly what they need from a Sage Intacct perspective. And then I present that statement of work to them after I do the scoping call. So two different calls, scoping call, statement of work review. One of the things that I say to them kind of close to the end is I talk about how communication is the key component of a good implementation. And so I have this fun line that I do in every review. I say, I've never met in all of my time anybody that said they've been dreaming since they're a little baby about implementing a new accounting software. Never heard anybody tell me that's the thing that they've been thinking about since the day they were born. It's something they just really want to do. Never heard that. And I've never run into an implementation that didn't have some level of challenges. Our job as your implementer is not to avoid challenge. That's impossible. But our job is to help smooth out the speed bumps, to communicate through it. Our job is to be really good communicators. But you as a client need to be very good at communicating back to us. What I see when it comes to the adoption of technology and implementing it is organizations that don't have a good plan, don't have a good communication structure, and don't know where they're starting, don't fully understand where they're starting, where they're going, struggle a lot. And I'll be honest with you, I've been there. I've been there with my own systems in which I tried to patch it together. What I learned, and I don't know if you know this, Zach, October will be our 20-year anniversary as a company.
Wow. Very
I have
impressive.
learned, and it took me probably 19 years. I kid a little bit. But I learned that sometimes being cheap up front costs a lot more money, and doing it right out of the gate takes a lot more purpose.
Yeah, I think that applies in a lot of business situations.
Yeah.
The trying to save a little money up front when just a little bit of spin up front will save you a ton on the back end. So,
Yep.
how can technology be effective in facilitating management of remote teams compared to traditional in-person management practices?
So I'm a little biased here. I've
Mhm.
almost always been remote.
Yep.
Okay. And so I've always built systems that supported a remote workforce and tried systems that supported that remote workforce. And so I don't have as much insight into a non-remote workforce as I do a remote workforce. But what I do realize is that what you want and what you need to invest in a remote world has everything to do, again, going back to communication. So, what's the hugest value, even though some people look at it as a deterrent, the hugest value of being in the same office with a group of people on a daily basis is the relationship side. Because people
Totally.
do for others that they like, that they respect, and that they deal with, that are physical beings to them. It's really easy being on the other side of a screen and not having that human connection. And so part of what is impactful, and we still don't have it completely at TydeCo, okay, is how do you create that human connection in a remote environment? And it does require technology, but it requires purposeful deployment of that technology in a fun and engaging way that make people feel like they're part of a community. And so it's less about technology and more about how you utilize that technology. And you can do that with Teams and Zoom, and you can do that with however you want it, however you want. But if you're not purposeful about it, it doesn't uh, it doesn't hit home. The last thing I would say is I think COVID gave us all a much better understanding of how to try to create community in a more disconnected world. And my fear right now is that we're moving so far away from that. We're not remembering what we learned there. I remember during COVID doing virtual cheese tasting with pairings of beer and wine. We wouldn't send the beer and wine, but we'd send the cheese and we'd send a pairing document ahead of schedule, and people would be able to go out, and then we'd have somebody come on and communicate about that. Something that took us out of the business world and into something more fun. When I was in South Africa just 3 weeks ago, my outsourced accounting team did a game, a happy hour game night, if you want to put it that way, in which people came on and we did these games. And some people had a glass of wine, some people didn't, depend on time zone. I think the people that were like 10 a.m. in Pacific time weren't drinking. And then people that were in South Africa, that was like 5 p.m. Uh, uh, might have had a glass of wine, but again, a moment in which had nothing to do with work. We didn't talk about billables or the clients or anything of that nature. We had a fun game that that was kind of competitive. The way we rolled this back into work is there was trivia questions that were accounting related. And if I'm being honest with you, I got some wrong, and I was like a little bit embarrassed.
Hey, just because you're at the top of the spear doesn't mean you have to retain everything.
Hey, I do a pretty good job of retaining.
Yeah. What ethical considerations should companies keep in mind when utilizing tech?
How do I want to answer this? Everybody's talking about AI, okay? And AI is being deployed into almost every technology. Maybe not well, maybe not with enough understanding, but every technology is saying they're AI enabled or AI integrated or AI first or AI, 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 AI. I think the ethical concern comes with that right now more than anything else. And the reason being is that I'm a huge proponent of AI. Don't get me wrong. I pay for ChatGPT. I pay for Copilot. I use both every day. I think sometimes staff get annoyed with as much as I rely on AI, but it's very much about my thought process, not just regurgitating what AI tells me. But more importantly, is they all hallucinate. They all get things wrong. It is still our job to make sure that we're deploying correct information into our businesses, and especially when we're consulting with clients. This whole thing with zero uh, partnership with Claude, I have some questions about what that means from an ethics perspective and the information that's coming back out of the system in those circumstances. I have questions on how people are going to deploy sort of generic approaches to utilizing technology to provide services. I went back to, if I go back to the statement, maybe not the conversation, but the statement when it came to the resume building, where at one point are you misrepresenting yourself because that's the right keyword? This is where I think ethics in technology is really changing in today's uh, world. There's a lot of other things we can talk about, but I'm super focused there. And not to do a plug, but one of the things that I appreciate about Sage and why we're a partner of Sage is they have their trust label and they've built their AI models internally. They're not external like Claude or something like that. And they're very, very specifically built and only deployed when they know that what's going to come out of it is auditable and accurate and has the best intention to the end user. I don't see that with every other product.
To wrap up, what advice would you give to talent management professionals looking to leverage technology for the first time?
I think the most important thing is to understand that technology is an aid to you as a talent evaluator, that technology used right is going to elevate your capabilities and your success, that technology is not a replacement for you or replacement of you, but is really an ability to expand your capabilities and own it and own the understanding. Sometimes I can tell you the first time that I looked into technology was a little scary. I had to understand how databases were structured, how data flow worked, the why of the system, and the why a system was created the way it was. So I understood what the input and output was. But if you get there, I think technology can provide this amazing partnership for you and propel you into different opportunities that you probably never considered.
Well, thank you, Matt, for being here.
Zach, it's been great. Really appreciate the time. Maybe you'll let me back on here, but let me know how the listeners react.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time as well. And thank you all for listening to On Point, a podcast by Oak Street Funding. I'm Zak Crickmore, and tune in next time when we sit down with more industry leaders, wherever you listen to podcasts, as we get on point. Don't forget to rate and review on Spotify, like and subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram for more insights and behind the scenes content at onpoint.with.osf. See you next time.